Okay, we're here at the mid-game, and we'll talk about a couple things briefly. We'll talk about the rings as they move about the board, ring protection, how to protect your rings from getting popped back to their home track. A thing called the discovered check, when we surprise our opponent by moving the ring off the disc in mid-board amidst all the action. And the trap, how to trap your opponent in the corner and create difficulty for him to escape and get back on the board, thereby advancing your team a number of moves. When your rings are up against the opponent's pips like this, there's no need for them to be here like this because they can't go over the pip anyway, right? The pip is a block, and this has to go around. So why put your pieces here to begin with? If they wind up here by accident and this guy comes this way, well, that's one thing. But given a choice, you want to keep your pieces askew on the diagonal. That way, nothing can happen here. If this guy should take his ring off on a 2 and 1 roll, you're not there to get popped, right? He can't hit you. So that's a very simple, logical thing to remember, but difficult to remember because as we're trying to keep track of all the moves in the mid-game, it's kind of like chess. There's so many permutations and combinations of geometric problems that it's difficult to keep track, let alone conceive of all the moves. So rather than create problems for yourself that you have to keep track of, just keep your pieces askew, if possible, okay? Easier said than done, right? And even so, that's for example, even if this guy's here and this guy's here, right? This guy's still subject to being hit because if this guy's behind, he gets a 2 and a 1 roll, see you later. You're going back to jail, right? So it's not that simple. It might look simple, but it's not. Even if this piece was, let's see, if this piece was here and your ring was here, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a 1, there you go, back to jail, right? So you got to try to bear some of these combinations in mind, and that provokes difficulty. You got to use your head. You got to think. So let's talk about the discovered check. The discovered check is when your opponent removes his disc. He removes his ring from his disc, okay, on a certain roll, revealing the disc. And there's no defense for that because, of course, you don't know what your opponent is thinking or what he's planning. And a lot of times the mid-board is congested. And there's lots of permutations of moves here that you're trying to keep an eye on. And all of a sudden, boom, he lifts that piece off on a 4 roll. And guess what? If the other die is 1, see you later. Back to jail you go. So that's another reason to keep your piece askew. But just a warning that that's one of the very subtle intricacies of the game, is that your opponent can, in one roll of 2 dice, bump you without any forewarning. There's no way you could possibly have foreseen that, right? So that's our discovered check. Kind of like in chess when you have the king on the back row and you got a rook in front of it and a queen on the same file, right? The open file, and if you move that rook, then that check, the king is automatically put in check by the queen, right? It's not quite that complicated, but you get the idea, okay? Now the trap, let's work the trap. Here, the red team can be trapped by this green team. If the dice moves are right, and if the planning is dastardly enough and things work out, then this guy gets trapped here, right? Now let's just make an example here of what can happen and what usually does happen, okay? Now what happens is this guy has to get a 1 to go back, right? And then he's got to go across. He's got to get a double 1 to go back for both pieces and then probably separate and go across. But that's not just the case here. The 1, if he gets the 1 on the die, right, which is what, 1 out of 6? 1 out of 6 times 2, what is that, 1 out of 12? I'm not quite sure of that math, but sounds about right. Then you get the 1, you go back here, and you got to get out, right? But he's blocked here. This is open, that's blocked, that's open, that's blocked. So on 4 out of the 7 files, this guy's blocked, right? So he's got some real problems here. If you get this guy trapped, he's going to be moving all his other pieces because he can't move that piece, right? He's going to be moving his pieces into place. He's thinking, yeah, we're gonna get this guy. I'm mad because he's got me trapped, right? So that's something to bear in mind, but you also want to bear something else in mind, something very, very important. You don't want to keep this guy here too long, and why is that? That's because as your pieces move down the board, okay, as your pieces start coming into position here in your home court, you want to keep this rank and file open. The playing space here gets smaller and smaller as you head into your home court. And you want to try to keep this space open so that you can make your 6 moves, your cross court 6s, right? You can make that move to the corner, right? But if he's in the corner, then of course you can't land here, right? So you're going to try to keep your other 2 ranks open, but that's easier said than done, and the dice are rarely that fortuitous that they let you do that. So if you keep this guy here too long, anywhere in the corner or back here, got him trapped, you got to be careful, because if he stays here, he's going to mess up your cross-court advantage here when you get your high rolls. When you get your 5s and your 6s, you're not going to be able to go cross-court because he's blocking you. Look, he's got the block here, even if he just leaves the disc there. You want him, and you move your ring. You can't move your ring. He's right next to your disc. He's going to send you all the way back, right? So you want to let this guy out. Take 4, 5, maybe 6 rolls of the dice while he's trapped, right? While he's trapped. That gives you more of an advantage to move down the board, but then after a few of those rolls, let him out, because you don't want that to happen. You got to have maximum maneuverability on the backboard here to get yourself in place, okay? Now remember what we said about the 6 roll, the 5 and the 6, but particularly the 6. You've got to keep open spaces on the perimeter here, on the alleyways, in order to keep yourself from having to go backwards on those 6 rolls, right? And the 6 rolls tend to kill you. If you don't do that, if you make a boner, you can't move that over, and you're like, oh my God, no, where am I going to go? There's no other 6 move here. Then you got to go all the way back, okay? And you don't want to do that because it took you so long to get here in the first place, right? So that's the check. We'll call that the rear guard check. Kind of a fancier name than it needs to be, but that's a very important move. It can be here, but the best one is right here. Just block him into the corner like that and force him to get a 1 on the die to scram out of there, right? Okay. Another thing, if you keep the guy blocked there too long, here's what might happen. You might get something like this. He's got all his pieces down here, right? He can't move any pieces because you got him blocked. So he's been secretively getting everything together down here, and he's getting ready to go. Look, he's really close to the finish. And then, you got to open up one of these times and let him out of there. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to, but the dice will force you to. And then, what if he gets a double 6? What if he gets a double 6 from like here? Boom! He's back in one move. And, you're still jerrying your pieces around here, trying to figure out what's going on. And he's one move from the win because you kept him here too long, right? It's your own fault. So you want to let the guy out. Don't keep him there forever. Of course, he doesn't have to go. He could stay if he wants to, but sometimes the dice won't let you do that. Of course, you can't decide what you're going to do. The dice decide what you have to do, okay? So that's a very important part of the mid-game. And don't forget also, you can trap back on the home squares. If you want to trap your opponent back here, then you have free movement back and forth across your home squares here, and you don't have to worry about having this problem that we just talked about, right? So don't forget, you also can trap your opponent back on the home track and still have free flow of movement. And that can work quite easily. As the game progresses and you go from mid-game to on-game, you move your pips down and squeeze them in here and put together some kind of a Maginot line or some kind of a defensive posture here so that when you do get him back there, he can't get out, right? So that's another possibility that we're looking at, okay?